London has endured another night of German bombing. Most damage was concentrated in the East End. The RAF has struck enemy aerodromes in Le Havre and the Low Countries. In Russia, further German losses.
Here we are exploring two unique mediums of historical fiction: time travel and video game. Remember, video games are just as valid a form of media as anything else. I'm sure everyone has looked at certain points in history and wondered what they would do with the advantage of hindsight in order to change things. What many people don't do, however, is consider the price of doing so. If you can change a timeline, the timeline can change you. Titanic: Adventure Out of Time explores how one single night could have sealed the fate of millions for decades to come. Many who play video games will tell you that one of the benefits that you won't get in other media is the idea of multiple endings. They have been doing this as far back as the 1980s with TX1. Some video games give the player different rewards depending on how they played the game. In Metroid, for example, if you complete the game within a certain time period, you get to see Samus in fewer bits of clothing. And then, of course, there's the Silent Hill games, where the number of monsters you kill, or people you save, or items you pick up will determine if the character lives or dies, or if they live and get a good ending, or live and get a bad ending, or will they have to live the entire experience over again. I do think it would have been fun if Tomb Raider had had this mechanic as well. They experimented with it in the Angel of Darkness, but it doesn't go further than the Paris levels, and it doesn't really affect the ending of the game. There is a moment in Rise of the Tomb Raider where it does give you a choice to kill one of the main antagonists or not. If you don't, the floor collapses from under him and he dies anyway, but if you do kill him, you just get a bit more XP, I suppose. In Adventure Out of Time, it doesn't matter who you save or if you live or die. The only thing that's certain is that you cannot save the Titanic. 1,500 people are still going to die that night. Just make sure you're not one of them. The story focuses on Frank Carlson. In our timeline, he is a disgraced British spy who failed to get certain items off the Titanic and into the right hands. Because of his failure, the First World War happened, the Russian royals were overthrown and executed, allowing the Soviets to take over, and the Second World War is ongoing. An air raid hits his apartment on the 30th anniversary of the sinking, and he is sent back in time to fix his past mistakes, or make them worse. Carlson has to get a necklace, a notebook, a painting, and a copy of the Rubaiyat off the ship and into the right hands, with the assistance of a fellow spy named Penny Pringle. She has less freedom about the ship than Carlson, because she could only get a second-class ticket while Carlson is travelling first class. The player, as Carlson therefore, has to explore the entire ship to recover these items. This is where the beauty of the gameplay kicks in, because this allows the player to explore a recreated Titanic with as much attention to detail as possible. As it is the evening of the 14th of April 1912, the area is mostly deserted, save for a handful of memorable characters. Some are relevant to the plot, and some aren't. While some characters are based on real-life passengers and crew, much like with the Time Tunnel, everyone has a different name to their historical counterpart. Third Officer Pittman, for example, is changed to Morrow. He ends up going down with the ship rather than surviving as Pittman did. Unfortunately, he does shoot one of the more minor characters who was trying to bribe his way to safety, but that only happens if a certain interaction is made by Carlson. Likewise, there is another character called Eric Burns who has a reputation for obsessively taking photographs, who is quite possibly based on Daniel Marvin, who had a fascination with cameras and filming. He helps point Carlson towards one of the items if you manage to help him resolve his argument with his wife. The accuracy of the Titanic cannot be understated, no matter if it's a bit pixelated. As someone who grew up with classic games like Tomb Raider, Spyro and The Sims 1, I can't help but feel a little bit of nostalgia for this kind of aesthetic. The use of lighting is also unique, as not many video games at the time were able to do this. The long corridors or wide open spaces take advantage of the shadows to make them seem longer than they actually are, and you can only go so far with one click. It also gives the deserted ship a Kubrickian element, as if you're trapped in a dream. Cyberflix, the creators, intended Adventure Out of Time to play like an interactive movie, rather than render characters from the bottom up, who at the time would have looked like dolls nodding their heads to indicate that they were talking, but not showing much emotion, or bulging cartoon characters with very few polygons. The game makers intended to make it as realistic as possible, so real-life actors were filmed in costume, and the manipulation of their mouths and stiff movements gives them an Uncanny Valley aspect. On the upside, it means that you're not going to forget it easily. These days it has a bit of a charm to it. The phrase open world mechanic can leave a bad taste in some gamers' mouths, but making the Titanic an open world location is pretty much ideal because that is what every history nerd has longed to do, explore the Titanic. Fortunately, your friendly steward, with his trademark arched eyebrow, gives you a map of the ship. Before the ship hits the iceberg, time only progresses when the plot does, so one could take advantage of exploring the ship, and possibly even finding your way around before the sinking. When the ship does hit the iceberg, Carlson is on top of the fourth funnel, being held at gunpoint by Colonel Zeitel, one of the main antagonists. They are distracted by the collision and incapacitated until 1:05 AM. The player now has an hour to make sure that Carlson survives the sinking with the key objects. This can only be done by getting on a lifeboat. There is no huddling on top of Collapsible B for him. The jewel-encrusted rubaiyat concealed in the boiler room is based on a real copy that was on the ship and went down with the sinking. I wonder if Harry Widener knew about that. Colonel Zeitel wishes to exchange it for a painting that secretly contains plans. Vlad Demonic wishes to sell the rubaiyat to fund the Black Hand Gang, the same gang responsible for the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which kicked off the First World War. The notebook, located on the top of Titanic's fourth funnel, contains the names of communist leaders in Russia, Lenin, Stalin and Trotsky. If this leaves the ship in the right hands, it is given to Russian authorities and the three are executed, which prevents the creation of the Soviet Union. The diamond necklace, much like the rubaiyat, is intended to fund the Black Hand Gang. Carlson must trick Vlad Demonic into taking a fake replica of the ship with him, disguised as a woman using another passenger's shawl. Without the funding, World War I never happens. The painting is probably the most memorable object. As mentioned, the painting itself is just a cover for the art dealer Sasha Barbicon to smuggle sensitive information to Colonel Zeitel. Now, to the people who have never played this game, or seen this painting before, do you find anything odd about it? Well, to tell you the truth, it's a painting by Adolf Hitler. Okay, technically this particular painting was not made until after the sinking, but if it does leave the ship with Carlson, it becomes famous as one of the few artifacts to survive the sinking, which then means that Hitler becomes a famous artist instead of, Hitler, and World War II never happens. As I'm writing this script, I keep looking at the painting and I just can't help but get an unsettling vibe from it. One, because I know that it was painted by one of the most genocidal people of the 20th century, especially compared with photographs of the actual location it was painted on, which actually looks quite nice. But in the painting, it's as if all the happiness of the world has been sucked out of this image. Is that really the way Hitler saw things? There was no happiness, only hate. Quite possibly. If just one of these objects leaves the ship in the wrong hands or goes down with the ship, one of 6 endings can happen, not including the successful ending and the unchanged timeline. These range from being shot by the SS, being shot by a Red Army soldier, being killed by an atomic blast, or Carlson not making it to a lifeboat and going down with the ship. The only thing that no one saw coming was the iceberg itself. No one deliberately caused the collision. That was all an accident and something Carlson could not prevent. The vast range of characters handled the sinking differently, with some deciding to go down with the ship, and others desperately trying to get on a lifeboat, and some deciding to take their chances. The ending cutscenes of the game show Titanic sinking in full, some of which is a little exaggerated, like the stern spinning around as it goes down. But this was the first time one could see a digital model of the Titanic and get a feel at the sheer scale of the ship. As the game was released, the day after the CBS miniseries aired, it was robbed of the honour of being the first piece of media to show the Titanic split in half. The picky historian in me can't help but think that the good ending is wishful thinking, because even though certain figures did not play their part the way they did in our timeline, that doesn't mean the overall status quo would have changed. Evil people don't just show up out of the blue. The world makes them that way. The Russian Revolution was inevitable. Either the executions of Lenin, Stalin and Trotsky made them martyrs, which hastened the Bolsheviks, or the pressures on the Russian monarchy would have forced the Tsar's abdication anyway. But the provisional government would have at least had the chance to reorganise Russia into a more modernist power. And for all the preventing large events, the one thing the good timeline does not prevent is the Wall Street crash. I mean, if you manage to prevent World War I, Germany is probably not in as much economic turmoil as they were at the time, because after World War I, the Treaty of Versailles made Germany pay ridiculous amounts of reparations, even though they didn't even start the war. And while they're going through their post-war period, America doesn't give them a huge loan in order to lessen the burden of the reparations. And then come the Wall Street crash, America's not going to Germany and be like, we need our money back. And Germany's like, well, we kind of need money too. But who's to say that in the wake of the Wall Street crash anyway, that someone with the right amount of hate and charisma would not have come along to take advantage of people's anger. And Hitler, being a famous artist, doesn't mean he would have automatically become a good person. He would have still had the prejudices he grew up on. But that's just me overthinking. We're talking video game logic here. You can't get too bogged down in video game logic. Otherwise, there is no going back. Still, I think the uniqueness of this game has allowed it to stand the test of time. The visuals are still fun and interesting to look at, and the creator's attention to detail of the ship is nothing short of amazing. It has sparked a devoted fan base who are still picking apart the game and finding all kinds of hidden gems. The best thing video games can offer is giving us experiences that we can't find elsewhere, and exploring the Titanic in all its pixelated glory is one of them. And that was Adventure Out of Time. 3 more Titanics to go. 3. The next one I am teasing as we speak. And this is one of the first teasers I made because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. You may be able to pick up on it immediately. If not, maybe you want to watch High School Musical 3 sometime. Until next time.